All right. It is 2:30 and we're really eager to share this information with you all today. So I think now is a great time to get started. Welcome and thank you for making time for this training. Just a few things to kind of get us started here. Everyone's muted by default when you come in, just to kind of help with the background noise and things that can come up. But if you have something you need to say, or if we're getting to your question in the chat, you can unmute yourself to go ahead and chat with us. Because we do have such a large group, we would love for all the questions or comments to come in through the chat feature first, so that we can just make sure we have time for all the training content and for all the questions. So thank you all for doing that. And then also, just so you know, this training is being recorded. That way we can post it publicly later this week, so that folks who maybe couldn't be here today can view it. If there is interest and need in another live training, we'll certainly work with our partners to get that scheduled also, and let you know if those get on the calendar. All right, so today you have Sasha Kane from Home Base and me, Erin Willis from Housing Solutions. Will be walking through this training with you all on the emergency prioritization procedures for COVID-19. So getting us kicked off today, we're going to look at the policy. We have passed an emergency prioritization policy through Away Home for Tulsa's Leadership Council to help us respond to COVID-19 related to people who are at a higher risk of death or mortality due to the pandemic and this illness. So we'll talk about the policy, then we'll look at the tool and do some training on the tool, how to administer it, how to score it, and where to document it to make sure that it is being used to prioritize your folks. And then we'll jump into the matching procedure. So how will this change how resources are linked to people from our by name list moving forward? And then we're planning on having time at the end for some wrap-up Q&A, but if you have a question that comes into your mind during the presentation, of course, please use the chat function and we'll try to answer it as we go. Okay, so just to kind of bring us all up to speed on what's happened since July. In July, the Coordinated Entry Task Group that of yesteryear, of last year's Away Home for Tulsa structure, met and discussed a lot of things coordinated entry, but one of them was COVID-19 and how to amend our prioritization procedure in response to COVID-19, and how can we add prioritization for folks who are at high risk. Home Base was there and provided a lot of examples of what other communities are doing. There's a lot of different approaches out there, but where we landed was on the policy that was passed by our Leadership Council on August 25th. So the Leadership Council passed the policy on August 25th with some requests that we pulled together the new Coordinated Entry Task Group under our new governance structure and give it another review and talk through some of the concerns that were posed during the Leadership Council meeting. We got through that and we are ready now to train and implement this plan. This plan had two pieces, an immediate prioritization plan that we could enact right away without building a new tool or adding steps in any part of our system. And what we're training on today is our interim plan. And so this plan will be in place and under the overview of the Coordinated Entry Task Group to determine when it can sunset and go away, and maybe how it needs to change along the way as we learn more about it. So today is the first training on using the COVID risk tool, which is part of our interim plan, and it will be live in an HMIS on Monday, October 26th. So that is this Monday so that we can begin using it next week. So I'm going to give it over to Sasha to talk about these, the plan and kind of where we landed on ours and the details of that.
Sure, thank you for the introduction, Erin. So when we designed this tool with the task group of folks brought together, we wanted to make sure that as many people who are experiencing homelessness, who have high acuity needs, but also who have high risk of complications due to COVID-19 would be matched to permanent housing resources as quickly as possible. So as we know, the current system with the VI-SPDAT doesn't really focus on the same types of things that are making folks vulnerable in this moment. And so the goal was really to pivot a little bit so that we would take into consideration the conditions that in this moment are really making folks vulnerable to grave illness or passing away. And so there are two phases of the plan that the group developed, and we'll talk about both of these. The first is the immediate plan that is rolled out based on existing data, existing practices, and then an interim plan that comes into play once we have a little bit more information through the tool that we'll go over today to be able to prioritize folks that are vulnerable. So as far as the immediate plan goes, this is a plan that dedicates 80% of openings that come up through coordinated entry to folks with high VI-SPDAT scores. So kind of like the way we normally do it, so that folks with high scores in each intervention range and who are also staying in the quarantine and isolation hotel, so the City Lights Hotel. So basically, this is overlaying the prioritization of vulnerable folks who are staying in the hotel on top of the prioritization of folks scoring on high on the VI-SPDAT. So folks with the same score, and say two people have 8 points on the VI-SPDAT, one person is staying in the quarantine hotel and another person is not. The person who has 8 points and is staying in the hotel would be prioritized for the next opening in rapid rehousing. And that would be for 80% of openings that come up. And then for 20% of the openings, we would just be using the normal prioritization procedure, the pre-COVID procedure. So for the interim plan, this is the one that's based on the risk screening and triage tool that we're introducing today. Similarly, in this plan, 80% of openings will be matched based on the results of that screening tool. And if two folks have the same score on the tool that we're about to go over, then someone who is unsheltered would be prioritized. And again, 20% of openings, so about every fifth opening, will be prioritized based on the regular prioritization criteria. And we'll come back to this again, but this does not in any way trump eligibility requirements of your programs. So this new prioritization will not result in anyone who is not eligible for your program to be matched to it. Okay, so now diving into the actual tool itself with a little bit of background. The tool is intended for all folks experiencing homelessness, whether they are sheltered or unsheltered, and it's built to be used for individuals and entire households as well. It's a self-report tool similar to the VI-SPDAT, so we didn't want to narrow access by making folks have to have a diagnosis of these conditions. As we know, there's inequities, all sorts of inequities in access to healthcare, so the group picked this self-report tool that basically requires no verification or evidence. It's a series of questions about conditions that the CDC lists on their website that are risk factors that would cause folks to be more likely to have grave illness or death from COVID. And so we'll want to complete the tool with every adult aged 18 or over, every single person, regardless of their household composition. Fine. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through the condition risks for severe illness from COVID-19. And again, these are listed on the CDC website, where you can also find more details about the conditions. Something important to note here is that we'll want to approach this, again, similarly to the VI-SPDAT, where folks have it's a yes or no question that the person self-identifies whether they have this condition. It's possible to kind of explain what some of these are, but also we want to be mindful and make sure that we're not getting into diagnosing them, that we're not listing symptoms and asking someone if they have it. So it's trying to keep it as just a yes or no, do you have this or not, maybe with some clarifications, because as you'll see, some of these conditions, there's going to be some examples of what that might be. So starting, walking through all of them, there's one of the risk factors is currently having cancer. And so this is like at this moment, because at this point, the CDC has not listed history of cancer as a risk factor for severe illness. So this is, do you currently have cancer? Another risk factor is chronic kidney disease, and this one pretty much at any stage of it is a risk factor for severe illness. And this one, I think, maybe a little bit less commonly known than cancer, at least for me. It was something that I'm learning about now. So if there's clarification that's necessary, you might say that this is where the kidneys are damaged and they can't filter blood as well as they should. And folks, like, typically, folks, if they have it and have received a diagnosis, hopefully they'll be able to answer that question. And if they don't remember anything about their medical history, you'll see that we've built a point into the tool for that as well, if they don't know about any of their medical conditions or if they refuse to answer about any of them. So chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or more commonly known as COPD, these are problems including emphysema and chronic bronchitis. I think folks more typically know emphysema, but they cause airflow blockage and breathing related problems. Fine. So immunocompromised state is one of those conditions where you might list a couple causes, because folks might be like, okay, so why might I have that? So that can occur from solid organ transplant or blood or bone marrow transplant. It could be for someone who has other immune deficiencies. It could be due to HIV if they're not on HIV treatment, or it could be due to prolonged use of corticosteroids or use of other immune weakening medicines. So you'd be asking someone if they have an immunocompromised state. And obesity is defined as a BMI over 30, but again, it's self-report here. So if a person self-identifies as being obese. And serious heart conditions, for these, CDC includes heart failure, coronary artery disease, pulmonary hypertension, cardiomyopathies. So this is a list that can be used to kind of give examples of what some of those conditions might be, is sort of like the SPDAT with certain mental health conditions. Just two more. There is sickle cell disease, where red blood cells get stuck and cause blood flow and die early, causing a constant shortage of blood cells. And finally, type 2 diabetes. And for this one, it's type 1, so the type that folks are typically born with. That one doesn't cause expanded risk, but for type 2 diabetes, that causes folks to be at greater risk of complications and dying from COVID. There's a prompt for the screening tool, and Erin, I'm not sure if the whole sheet has been sent out already, but if it hasn't, we'll, or if it's built into HMIS, I think everyone will go over that. But basically, there's a prompt to help introduce the tool to clients and to explain that it's aimed to talk about risks related to COVID-19 and to connect folks to resources to improve their safety and to get consent to administer the tool. And basically just introduce that there's a list of conditions that might cause someone to be more vulnerable and risk complications from COVID, and that you'll be asking them about conditions that they have, or they've been told that they have, or anyone in their household has. So this is the tool itself, and we've walked through that list of conditions risk. There's also an age-related risk that CDC lists. So we've weighted the age ranges, and for folks that are 50 to 59, that correlates with 1 point on the tool. For 60 to 69, 2 points, and age 70 plus 3 points. So regardless of whether folks have any condition risks, if they fall into one of these age categories, they are prioritized based on the tool. And then there is a point assigned for each of the conditions that we just went through. And something important to note here, that that's a maximum score of 4. So if folks have more than 4 co-occurring conditions, they'll still just get 4 points. It's capped at 4 points here. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, for folks who don't know their medical history at all, so they can't answer as to whether they have any of these conditions, or they don't want to answer about their medical history, they are also getting a point on this tool, this prioritization tool. Okay, so a couple important things to note about administering the tool. This isn't a replacement of the VI-SPDAT. I think, as you saw, folks are going to be prioritized both on this tool, but also on the VI-SPDAT. It was that 80-20 ratio, and we want to make sure that they don't miss out on any housing opportunities. So this would be a tool that is administered in addition to the VI-SPDAT. And if someone is obviously free to decline to answer questions about their medical history, and you might have their age already based on the VI-SPDAT, then they can be prioritized based on their age, and just that point that we showed about for folks who don't want to answer questions about their medical history. And just to reiterate, you'd be using that box if they don't know or refuse to answer all of the risk conditions. So you wouldn't be using it if someone said, well, I don't know if I have an immunocompromised state, and they did answer whether or not they have cancer. So this would be only used if they don't know or refuse all of the conditions.
All right, thanks, Sasha, for walking through that. So this tool lives in HMIS under the Assessments tab. Oh, let's see. Before we jump into this, a question just came through and I don't want to miss it. So if they have already had COVID and were isolated, have recovered and are still sheltering, but are still hitting these vulnerabilities, age, medical conditions, where do they fall in eligibility screening? That's a good question, Sarah. So if they're at your hotel still, they are still homeless. It's considered emergency shelter. They will be prioritized based on their medical history, so based on their age and those conditions, wherever their score falls, they'll be prioritized based on that score for projects that they're eligible for, just like somebody would at one of the emergency shelters or someone who is unsheltered. If your person is next on the list for a project and they have a COVID risk score of 7, and there's another person who also has a COVID risk score of 7 who is unsheltered, that person would get that next project over the person in your shelter. Does that answer your question?
Basically, regardless of whether they've already had COVID or not, this tool would apply.
Yeah.
Erin, it's Ashley. Can I ask you a question? I think I want to clarify something.
Sure.
So we're going to use this tool even on individuals that are not at City Lights. What's the benefit of using this tool if they wouldn't be prioritized based on COVID because they're not staying at the City Lights shelter? Would it help them bump them up on the VI score for the other 20% that would be taken off the by name list? I think I'm just confused on that.
Sorry, I think we weren't clear that the two prioritization models, they don't overlap. So before we have enough information based on the tool, we're prioritizing folks who are in the hotel. But once, now that the tool is going to roll out, we are no longer, after a little bit, after there's some people who have been assessed with the tool, we are no longer going to be prioritizing folks at the hotel. We're going to be prioritizing based on their tool score.
Awesome, that makes sense. All right, thanks.
We're actually going to be prioritizing among the people who are tied, as Erin mentioned, we're going to be prioritizing folks who are unsheltered.
Thank you, that makes more sense.
Okay. Thanks for asking questions, folks. So now that you know what the tool looks like, it's important to know where to document it so that it feeds into our prioritization model, which, no surprise, that's going to be in HMIS. Keith has built it out for us in the assessments tab. So the same place you'll find the VI-SPDAT is where you're now going to find the COVID-19 risk screening and triage assessment tool, which I'm going to refer to as the COVID risk tool during this training. So you'll go to assessments, select from the drop down. Really important to note though, it's not the same thing as the COVID-19 survey, which is a symptom screener. So be sure you're selecting the very last option, the COVID-19 risk screening and triage assessment tool. Once you select it, the tool will pop up and the prompt will be embedded into the HMIS. So does anyone in the household have or been told they have any of the following risks, with drop downs in each option. So as you go through listing the risks and selecting your answers, you'll click save, and this is what a completed tool will look like in the system. Under age, it'll give you a prompt for the score of points, so you'll know how many to account for that response. Under medical conditions, you'll see it's 1 point for each one, but with a maximum here of 4. So if they have 5 or 6 yeses here, it's still just going to be 4 points. Anything less than 4 is 1 point for each yes. And then only if they refuse to answer or do not know any of their medical history, you will select yes here for a score of 1. If they do know their medical history, or they do like some of it or all of it, this will always be a no. So one thing that's different on this tool than the VI-SPDAT that many of you are used to is this is not automatically scored. It's going to take some math. So just be cognizant of that. We've tried to include prompts to help make that easy. But down here under COVID-19 risk screening score, that's going to be a manual calculation that the assessor will have to do. The maximum score here, the maximum possible score is 7. So if you're scoring something and you think they scored a 9, that will be a red flag to go back and look at it again and adjust the score. The maximum allowed is 7. And you can print this if you need to keep it for paper copies and files based on agency policies. But for our system, this field will be added to our by name list to help inform prioritization. Oops, sorry folks. Okay, so now let's, oh, sorry, so Keith just posted, this tool will be available or start to roll out on Monday, the 26th, which is this coming Monday. So I'm gonna send reminders to let folks know that the tool is rolling out. Because our system is large. It does take HMIS a minute to kind of get it into all the projects. But if you don't have it or don't see it available by Tuesday, then you'll want to reach out and kind of raise your hand for some assistance. But let's practice. So we've talked about how to score it and some of the conditions, and we've got some polls to practice with here. So Tessa is 60-year-old, obese female who has type 1 diabetes, COPD, and chronic kidney disease. What would her score be on the tool?
Erin, do you want to flip back to the slide where we have the tool pulled up, and then I'll copy the prompt into the chat so that folks can look at the tool?
Yeah. I'm hiding the answers now.
So I've just sent everyone that hypothetical in the chat.
All right, we're going to give it one more minute for folks to respond. All right, 15 more seconds. Don't be shy. Okay, so it looks like 50% of the respondents said 4. Oh my. 30% said 6, and then we had a few 3s, and 30% said 5, and we had a few 3s and a few 6s. So let's go back and check our work on Tessa. Guys, I don't know how I marked on the screen. I'm sorry if you can see that. But the correct answer for Tessa is 5. She's a 60-year-old obese female with COPD and chronic kidney disease. So she got 2 points for her age and 3 points for her medical conditions.
And this is again because she has type 1 diabetes, which is not a risk factor. It's just type 2.
All right. So then let's jump to our next example to practice on, and that's for Tom. Tom is a 30-year-old male who has sickle cell disease and does not know if he has type 2 diabetes. What is Tom's risk score on the COVID-19 risk screening and triage assessment tool?
And I just sent that prompt in the chat if we want to flip back.
Yeah, oops, I just realized, sorry. Let me fix
The explanation for the last one, I see there's a question about why does it say the score of 4 is the highest? How can she have a 5? So the condition score is capped at 4, but there's still the age tiers. So folks get a score of 0, 1, 2, or 3 based on their age, and then they get a score of up to 4 based on their conditions.
Okay, so the age is not included in that cap.
Correct. The age is separate.
Okay,
this
that's where I got it.
Because we wanted to balance the fact that age by itself without pre-existing conditions is a risk factor, and so to balance those two things, we have 2 sections, and just the conditions one is capped.
Okay, all right. I didn't catch that at first, so thank you.
You are giving us great ideas about how to be clear if in the event that we need to do this training again, so I appreciate all your questions.
Ditto.
Will you share the tool on the screen again, please?
Oh, yes, sorry. You haven't memorized it yet?
You know, I was going to do it without and see if I could do it, but I'm not going to embarrass myself, so no.
And I'm going to leave this one up about 30 more seconds. Okay, so looks like majority of folks said a 2, with some folks saying 1, and then a few 0s, 3s, and 4s. Let's see. Tom, oh, that's Jack. Tom. Okay, so Tom scores a 1 for sickle cell disease. He doesn't get any points for age. He knew that he had sickle cell disease, but didn't know if he had diabetes. So he doesn't get that extra point for not knowing, because he did know some of his medical background. Remember that the refused or doesn't know conditions only applies if they don't answer all of the medical health conditions. Does anyone have any questions about how that score came out?
Is there a way to add some clarifying information on the survey? So it looks like most people, or a lot of people, thought the score of 2 because of the other, because he wasn't sure of his diabetes. So I'm wondering if there's a way just to put a clarification piece in the survey to help people score it.
Yeah, we'll do 2 more examples, and then I'll hop into HMIS and show kind of some. Actually, I think it's in my built-in here. Let me hop back.
Is there a way that we can change the instruction on that to make it clear that it's when they don't answer all questions? I think, would that help?
Maybe. So yeah, definitely. And however we need to word it, we'll adjust it. This is really good. This is really helpful. So right now the prompt is only select yes if they don't know or refuse to answer all of the medical conditions. We could just add on to there, like if they know 1 or 2, this answer is a no, just to be really clear. Does that sound like it would be helpful? Okay. Make sure we make that adjustment. All right, thank you guys.
Will someone always score a 1 because they might not know their medical history? If they answer no to all of those, will they always get a 1 for they may not know their entire medical history, or could they score a 0?
So if they don't know any of their medical history, they will at least get 1 point. They could get more based on their age, but they will at least if they don't know. Yes, or if they
But if they say no, they don't get that point.
Right. If they say no, I don't have cancer, no, I don't have kidney disease, they do not get the I don't know or I refuse to answer point.
Okay. So okay.
Yep.
Got it.
So if you ask that and they say, I don't know, then they could get that point?
If it's an I don't know to all of it, it has to be.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, so let's practice a few more times. Jack is a 55-year-old obese, immunocompromised male with COPD, a serious heart condition, and type 2 diabetes. Let me get my poll up so that you guys can answer. Oops, sorry.
I will pop the prompt into the chat again.
Wait a minute,
so that Erin
sorry,
can
guys.
flip.
I put the wrong one up. Okay, here we go. Here's Jack's responses.
And Erin, you can flip back to the tool. I just sent the prompt in the chat.
Thank you. Oh, can you guys move your survey on the screen? Okay, yeah, Susan, I think you can move it around. Let me know if you can't though. All right, I'm gonna leave it up about 30 more seconds. Okay, let's check our results on Jack. So it looks like it's a battle between a 5 or a 6, and the correct score is 5. So he got 1 point for his age, and then he had 5 of the medical conditions. But because we have a maximum score here of 4, his total score is going to be a 5 instead of a 6. Keisha, are you giving everyone the answers in the chat? I'm kidding. So for folks who scored 6, just be mindful of the maximum here under the medical conditions. It's it'll be tricky until you get the hang of it, but
Yes, Erin.
Okay. And so next, we have one more example to do, and that is for Janet. Janet is a 70-year-old female who refuses to answer questions about her medical history. So Janet is a 70-year-old female who does not know or refuses to answer her medical history. Okay. Okay, folks, putting the answers in the chat. Let's go ahead and wrap up the poll and see where we landed. So it looks like majority of folks said 4. And that is the correct answer. Janet scored a 4 because she was 70 years of age or older, and she did not know or did not want to answer all of the medical risk conditions. So she got the point for that, plus her 3 points for age to equal 4. I am getting some chats that folks are still a little bit confused about the scoring on the tool. So I want to spend a little bit more time on this before we move on to discussing matching. So you can, if you break it up a little bit, you're going to look at age and take whatever their weight is based on the age, so 1, 2, or 3. Then you're going to look at their medical conditions. And if they have 1 condition, they're going to get a score of 1 for medical conditions. If they have 2, they're going to get a score of 2. 3, we'll give them a score of 3. And then if they have 4 or more of these medical risk conditions, they're going to get a score of 4. You will add that score to their age for their total score if they answer their medical risk conditions. If they don't know or refuse to answer all of the medical risk conditions, you will simply take the weight they get for age and add it to the 1 point they get for not knowing or refusing all of the medical risk conditions. I'm curious to know if there are any more questions or maybe what is kind of tricky for folks so that we can kind of take that back and keep that on our radar for ways to maybe improve this process. Yeah, same, Keith. We really do wish HMIS had the capability to score this for us. They kind of spoiled us with the automatic scoring for VI-SPID-AT, but it's just not a function that HMIS allows right now. So this is going to be manual. I know a lot of times when we're in this field, it's not because we really love math, it's because we love social work and social services. So asking guys to do math is not super fair, but it's where we're at. And this is, you know, again, where we're starting, it may not be where we land. So what we want to do is roll this out to learn from this process and do our best to start prioritizing folks that are have significant health risks related to COVID-19. Okay. All right. With that, we're going to move on and talk about the matching procedures just a little bit. We just really want to drive home that this tool is not going to supersede eligibility for any of the projects who are participating and dedicating their units to coordinated entry. But we are going to maintain that 80-20 ratio for folks who are eligible. So how that's going to look, because in our system right now, when resources become available, they request referrals kind of in real time. We don't do like batch referrals at the beginning of the month. So as referrals begin to come in, we will be maintaining that 80-20 ratio as each referral comes through. So if we had a by name list that everyone had the COVID risk tool completed on today, and we had 5 referrals requested, the first 4 are going to go based off of the COVID risk tool of eligible persons. And then the 5th referral will go to the next eligible person based on our standard coordinated entry prioritization, which is BI-SPAT, make the time homeless. So if there are no eligible individuals for the project who's requesting a referral that have a completed COVID risk tool on our by name list, we will use the standard prioritization, even though it will not maintain that 80-20 ratio. So we'll always look first to the COVID risk tool and make sure we're on we don't have any more than 20% of referrals going to our standard procedure. But if there's no one eligible, we'll use standard procedure until we do have more tools completed and can use that and build up that ratio again. Does that make sense? Sasha, would there be anything you want to add?
I think we can provide clarity if folks have questions on this, but it's also going to be an area where I think we built into this process the fact that we're going to be fine-tuning this as we roll it out and bringing it to the coordinated entry working group to work through any challenges that arise in terms of folks administering it or in terms of the matchmaking process. And so it'll be kind of a work in progress.
Definitely. All right. So just to wrap up, I want to go back to our timeline and just remind folks that this tool is going to be rolling out in your HMIS projects starting on Monday. So our coordinated entry process will begin looking for those scores and implementing that prioritization starting next week. We fully expect that it'll be a bit of a ramping up period before we really have a good stock of scores on this tool. So keep that in mind, but we're going to go ahead and get rolling pretty quickly. Okay. What questions do folks have at this point?
Hi, so this is Susan. I have a document from Homebase about the prioritization procedures, and it says the interim procedure will be in effect through the end of 2020. Is this kind of an older document? So there is no intent to end it in just like 2 months?
No, there's no intent to end it in 2 months. I think
Okay.
that was kind of an old document. The Coordinated Entry Task Group will be monitoring this emergency prioritization policy as they meet monthly to determine like how to continue it or when to sunset it. We don't know how long this will go on, and we'll just follow kind of CDC guidelines and our local community response to COVID-19 to determine when we don't need to use it anymore.
Okay, that makes sense, because if I was, seeing October 26th is when it's going to hit HMIS, and we're going to fine tune, and then it ends. So I was just curious that this is probably an older. I will put that in my archive. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Does anybody else have any questions?
I had a question, Erin. So for this tool with us, I mean, pretty much all of our people already have some sort of medical condition. Are we still needing to complete this assessment as well as our VI SPDATs?
Yes. Yeah, you'll want to complete this as well, because we'll use that weighted score to prioritize them with the risk.
Okay. Okay.
Good to see you, Sarah. All right. Any other questions for us? This has been recorded, so we'll share this with everyone along with the deck and the policy document for everyone to have. And yeah, I think that's all we got. We might be giving you back some time today. So I'm sure you all have lots to do. Thank you for your time, and thank you for all the work you're doing. And we'll wrap up with that. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye. All right.
Hi.
Hi.
That was, I like the way that you walked through the scoring. I should have paused to do that the first time around.
Oh, let me stop recording. Whoops.